Hello everyone, it's me again doing another video. This time I thought I'd do a personal favourite. Mouse, Bird, Snake, Wolf. One of the best books I've read. So, if you want to listen, get comfy and tune in. Maybe we'll bring it a bit closer so you can see the pictures, because they are pretty good. Long ago and far away, in a world rather like this one, and with people rather like us, there were 3 children, Harry, Sue and Ben. Ben was known as Little Ben because he was so small. Like many worlds, the world they lived in was a marvellous place filled with marvellous things. It was a safe and calm and rather wonderful place. But it was also a strange and odd place as well. There were gaps and holes in it. There were places there seemed nothing at all. Places filled with emptiness. Some of these were as huge as deserts, and some were no bigger than a fingernail. The trouble was, the gods who had made the world had become rather fat and rather too pleased with themselves. Oh yes, they had worked great wonders in days gone by. They had made mighty mountains, tender flowers, rivers, forests and seas. They had made astonishing animals, the elephant, the camel, the whale. And man, of course, and woman, and of course babies and children, and beasts that we in our world have no names for. But they spent all day, day after day, lying on their clouds, sipping tea and nibbling cakes and sandwiches. They chatted about their creations and gazed down at them with deep fondness. "Your elephant, sir, is a thing of wonder," one would say to another. "Ah, yes, but what about your chain of mountains and your sparkling ponds and streams?" "But each time I see your wisteria, my eyes fill with tears. Such restraint, such delicacy. Oh, and those sweet daisies." "But your humpback whales, such magnificence, and your extraordinary zoette, your gazelle, oh, but your brant." And they would shrug and blush and lower their eyes. They'd be silent for a time and then they'd whisper, "Could any other gods come up with anything more astonishing?" And in their smiles they'd answer, "No, there are no other worlds like this one. There are no other gods like us. We are indeed the best of all the gods in the best of all the worlds." And so they lay on their clouds and floated through the sky and took tea and slept and snored. And yes, they did tell one another that they would make once they got back to work, if only they had the energy and if only they had the time. But in truth, their world was still unfinished, still had many gaps and spaces in it, and there was still much making to be done. One day, Harry, Sue and Little Ben decided to go wandering. Not too far, just through the fields and woods around their homes. They walked on walls, climbed over fences, jumped across streams and swung from trees. They dared one another to dash and leap through the empty spaces, which could be a little scary, but great fun. After a while, they lay down on soft turf beneath a gnarled old tree and beside a sparkling stream, and they rested. All of a sudden, Little Ben said in surprise, as if he'd never thought of it before, "This is a very peculiar world." He looked up at the clouds. "Why, there's so many gaps and spaces in it," he yelled. The gods took no notice. "It needs more things in it," he said. Still no notice. Little Ben sighed. "Have you ever looked into an empty space?" he asked his friends. "Of course we have," they said. "Sometimes," Little Ben continued, "when you look into an empty space, you can kind of see something in it." "Something in an empty space?" said Harry. "Yes," said Ben. "You can sort of see what's missing from it." "Like what?" asked Harry. "Like a mouse." "A mouse?" said Harry. "What on earth is a mouse?" "I don't quite know," said Ben. He wrinkled his nose and scratched his head. "It's a kind of mousy thing, I suppose." Harry shook his head. Sue rolled her eyes. Yes, said Ben. It's a mousy thing. A funny little squeaky scampery thing. Then it's just like you, said the others. Yes, Ben laughed, and he thought of a mouse inside himself. Tell you what, he said. I'll show you what one looks like. Watch. He glanced up into the sky. The gods weren't looking. He gathered some wool and some petals and some nuts and made the shape of a mouse with them. He laid it on the grass. Squeak and scamper, little mouse, he whispered. Come along, don't be shy. Squeak and scamper. The children laughed. They didn't really believe the mouse would squeak and scamper, but as they watched, it started to tremble and wake. Oh, look, they cried. What a lovely thing it is. The mouse tottered to its tiny feet. It sniffed the air. It peeped into the sky with its bright little eyes. It squeaked and squeaked again and squeaked again and scampered right away. The children clapped their hands. It seemed quite at home, they said. Ben giggled. At last, he exclaimed. This is a world with a mouse in it, thanks to me. And the children lay on the grass and thought of the mouse running through the fields and the forests and the empty spaces and through their minds, and they were very pleased. And the gods, they hardly seemed to stir at all. After a time, Sue said, Now I will have a turn. She looked into the sky. She looked into herself. I think, she said, that what this world needs next is a bird. The gods rolled over in their sleep, and a gentle thunder sounded. A bird? Asked the others. What kind of a thing is a bird? A bird, said Sue, is a kind of birdie thing, of course. It's a thing that sings and flaps its wings and it flies. Yes, that's it. It flies through the empty air. The others giggled. You're just making that up, said Harry. Of course I am, said Sue. And surely, said little Ben, there couldn't possibly be a creature like that. Could there? Yes, there could, said Sue. Just watch. So she collected some sticks, and she gathered some leaves, and she picked some grass, and she made a bird with them. She cradled it in her hands and held it up to the sky. This will never work, said Harry. Sing, bird, sing, said Sue. Come along, sing, bird, sing. And as the children watched, the bird opened its eyes and its small sharp beak, and it sang the sweetest of songs. Oh, they gasped. That is so beautiful, Sue. That is nothing, she said. Just watch. She held the bird close to her face. Now, little bird, she whispered. Fly, go on, flap your wings and fly away. Nothing happened, so she said it again. And the bird trembled in her fingers and she said it again. Fly, little bird, fly. And the bird kept on trembling and singing, and Sue said it all again, and said it all again, and the children chewed their lips in excitement, and at last the bird opened its wings, leapt from Sue's hand into the empty air, and it flew once, twice, 3 times around their head, then right out of sight. The children goggled and giggled and gasped. They were speechless. Oh, Sue, Harry and Little Ben said at last. That thing called a bird is simply wonderful. What a marvellous thing to have in the world. They clapped their hands and stamped their feet, and the ground shook with their excitement. High above, one of the gods opened one eye. He rolled over and looked down from his cloud. He smiled at the children having such fun. He saw the bird flittering across the world. What a pretty thing, he thought. How on earth did that get there? He glanced at the other gods. Maybe they'd been working whilst he'd been asleep. But it didn't look like it. He shrugged. Anyway, he thought it was very clever. Then he yawned, closed his eyes, and went back to his dreams. Little Ben and Sue turned to Harry. Now, they said, what will you make, Harry? Me? Yes, you, said Ben. Everyone must have a turn, said Sue. Harry wondered. He walked, and the others walked alongside. He stared into the wide sky and wondered. He stared into the dark earth and wondered. He stared into the forest and into the empty space of the world and wondered. He closed his eyes and stared into himself. Yes, he said at last. I shall make a snake. A god opened her eyes wide and looked down. A snake? Said the others. Harry smiled. Yes, a snake. It is a most peculiar thing. It is a long and twisty legless thing. It has a forked little tongue and sharp little teeth. It hisses and it slithers across the earth. Goodness gracious, said little Ben and Sue. What a weird creature. Now watch, ordered Harry. This will be very simple. He grabbed some clay from a little pond. He found some shining stones in the soil. He made a snake with them and laid it on the ground at their feet. Slither, snake, slither, he urged. Hiss, snake, hiss. But nothing happened. Try again, said Sue and little Ben. Try harder, Harry. Harry took in a big, deep breath. He looked up at the clouds and the god glared at him. The god shook her head at him. Harry took no notice. He tried to feel as the god feels when she is making things. He tried to feel as the snake feels when he is being made. Hiss, he hissed. Slither, he hissed. He twisted his body and flicked his tongue. Sss, he hissed. Sss, sss. It slithered toward, and it lifted its head and it hissed again. It slithered towards him across the grass. Its scales glittered, its eyes gleamed. It bared its sharp little teeth, it flicked its forked little tongue. The children backed away, and Ben held tight to Harry and Sue. And then the snake discovered a crack in the ground, and it slithered fast into the earth below. The children goggled. Golly, they gasped. Goodness gracious, what a thing! They were very quiet for a time. Perhaps, said little Ben at last, we've made enough for today. Perhaps we should have a rest like the gods do. And the god looked down and nodded. Yes, she said, have a rest like the gods do, before you do something silly. They did try, and little Ben almost fell asleep, as he did most afternoons because he was still so small. And they lay there on the ground in the sunshine, just as the gods lay on the clouds above. And they thought of the things they had made, just as the gods did, and they were extremely pleased with themselves, just as the gods were. But Sue couldn't keep still, and Harry couldn't keep quiet. I don't want to have a rest, he said. Nor do I, said Sue. If you haven't already read the book, can you guess what's going to happen next? They've made a mouse, they've made a bird, they made a snake. Maybe now they might make a... That's right, we'll see. They stood up straight and they stared across the earth and they stared into their minds and they searched their thoughts and searched their dreams and they wondered. They started to walk and talk as quickly as they walked. Listen, said Sue. What we need now is a thing called a wolf. A wolf? Said little Ben, who had to hurry to keep up. Yes, said Harry. Sue's right. We absolutely, definitely need a wolf. What in the world is a wolf? Asked Ben. Oh, said Harry. A wolf is a very wolfy thing. It has a great big hairy thing with a great big head, said Sue. That's right, agreed Harry. And it has great big massive teeth. And long legs and great big paws, said Sue. And it howls really, really loud, said Harry. And it runs really, really fast, said Sue. Oh, it's a wonderful thing, they cried. Little Ben said, but isn't that a bit... He scratched his head as if he didn't know the word he was looking for. A bit scary, he said at last. No, said Harry and Sue. Isn't that a bit dangerous? Of course not, said Harry and Sue. Don't be silly. Don't be scared. A wolf is a wonderful, beautiful, marvellous thing. And they stood still and stared up into the clouds and they yelled, Isn't it? Isn't a wolf a wonderful, beautiful, marvellous thing? And one of the gods who heard them looked down and smiled and shrugged and muttered, Yes, children, I suppose it is, and fell fast asleep. See, said Harry. See, said Sue. Said little Ben. Harry found some clay. Sue fetched some wool. Harry collected some big sticks. Sue gathered some big stones. They got some petal and nuts and grass. They made a wolf. There it was, lying on the ground beside them, waiting to be called. Little Ben watched the wolf. He walked towards a nearby tree. "If you don't mind," he said, "I think I'll climb up this tree." And up he went. "Silly boy," said Harry and Sue. They turned to the wolf. "How?" said Harry. "Run," said Sue. Nothing happened. "How?" shouted Harry. "Run," yelled Sue. Nothing happened. "Shall we stop now?" said Ben up the tree. "No," said Harry. "We just need to try harder," said Stu. So they tried harder. They tried to feel as a god feels when he is making things. They tried to feel as a wolf feels when it is being made. They raised their voices as if they were howling. They drummed their feet as if they were running. "Howl, wolf, howl," they howled. "Run, wolf, run," they howled. They woke a god and he sat up and dangled his feet over the edge of the cloud and wagged his finger in warning. "This is a job for the gods," he scolded, "not silly children like you." But they took no notice, and the god looked down in fascination as they snarled and drawled and yelped, and the ground trembled as they ran in a circle around the wolf. "Oh, oh, oh!" they yelled. "Oh, oh, oh!" And yes, the wolf stirred, and yes, it stood up, and yes, it howled, and yes, it ran. And it howled and it ran straight at Harry and Sue. And it gobbled them up. Then it howled once more and lay on the ground and fell fast asleep. The god clicked his tongue and shook his head. "What silly little children! What a very silly thing to do." And little Ben said, "Golly goodness gracious. What a weird, peculiar thing." He climbed down from the tree. Gently he touched the wolf. It was such a mighty thing, and he was little Ben, so small. He stared at the wolf and wondered. He stared into himself and wondered. He looked up at the gods looking down and he wondered. "What can I do?" he asked. The gods just shrugged and said, "I did warn them, you know." "Can I make it go back again?" called Ben. The gods stared into the sky. This was all very tiring and it would soon be time for tea and cakes. "Can I unmake things as well as make them?" shouted Ben. "Can I turn the wolf back into clay and sticks and petals and nuts and grass?" The god yawned. "You don't know, do you?" yelled Ben. "Do you?" The god rolled over and closed his eyes. Little Ben stamped his feet. "Turn back again, wolf," he said. Nothing happened. "Turn back again, wolf," he cried. "Come on, little Ben," he said. "Try harder." He tried to feel as the god feels when he is unmaking things. He tried to feel as the wolf feels when he is being unmade. He tried to feel like clay and wool and sticks and stones and petals and nuts and grass. "Turn back again, wolf," he cried. "Turn back again, wolf, turn back again, wolf." And he watched. The wolf began to turn back, and it turned into clay and wool and sticks and stones and petals and nuts and grass. And lying in the middle, fast asleep, were Harry and Sue. And Harry and Sue, "Thank goodness," sighed little Ben. He touched his friends. "Wake up," he whispered. "It's time to go home." And Harry and Sue sat up and yawned and stretched. They stepped out from the thing that had been their wolf. "I think we've made enough for now," said little Ben. "Don't you?" Harry and Sue nodded. "I think we should go home now," said little Ben. "Don't you?" Harry and Sue nodded again. They were silent. They had been inside their wolf, and now their wolf was inside them like a dream. They felt it, running through them. They heard it howling and snarling deep inside them. Ben took their hands and pulled them away. They ran home quickly through the fields and woods and into the empty spaces, across that lovely, strange, unfinished world. They were watched by a tiny mouse, hunched up in the grass, a lovely bird that soared in the sky, by a flickery snake from the dark little hole, and by the gods above, who were now beginning to stir and wake. "Nice sleep?" the gods asked one another. "Oh, yes," they said. "Oh, certainly. Oh, definitely. Oh, yes." "Cup of tea?" said one. "Piece of cake?" "Oh, yes. Oh, certainly. Definitely, yes." So they took tea and nibbled cake. And one god turned to another and said, "You know, I find that cake produces the most marvellous of dreams. It does indeed, said another. In my dream there was the prettiest little thing called a mouse. And you know, I think that's exactly what this world needs. I will make one tomorrow. And I'll make a very marvellous birdy thing called a bird, said another. And I a splendid, slippery, slithery snake, said a third. Anything else, they asked? Were there any other dreams? Do we need anything else? Such as, well, a wolfy thing, perhaps, one muttered. Oh no, came an answer. Whatever that is, I don't think we need a thing like that. And they all agreed. But then they fell silent, and there came a sound from deep inside themselves, and from the gaps in the spaces that they'd left below. Astonishing snarling, extraordinary howling. The gods listened and were entranced, and they all knew, as they sipped their tea and nibbled their cake, that a new marvellous beast would soon find its way out into the world again. And that is Mouse, Bird, Snake, Wolf. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you maybe tomorrow for another story.